Hello and welcome to another episode of the TheoBros Podcast. David here, your favorite right-wing chud. And joining me today is the host of the Snarfangle Podcast, Jake Metzger.
That's me, Jake Metzger. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I am a little exhausted. It was a long weekend, but a good weekend. It was the 4th of July celebration, the 250th anniversary of 1776 America as we know it today. And I tell you what, I had a fun time.
Yeah, same. 4th of July was really great. It happened on my Friday, so I didn't have to be in bed early for work the next day, which was great because it meant I got to stay up and watch fireworks.
Yeah.
Which I don't always get to, but so I was glad to do it this year. And, what better way to celebrate the 250th birthday of America than to dive into the topic that we're going to talk about this episode?
Yeah, last week when we did, I think it was episode 115 of Snarfangle, I'm like, yeah, these next 2 weeks, they're going to be controversial to say the very least. Last week we talked about being white-pilled and how my example of being white-pilled, a good stories of white-pill, meaning stories of hope in the current culture. My example was about a transgender person that I follow who is detransitioning. And I'm sure a lot of people will be mad at that. But that's that person's choice. And it is now your choice, David, to transition to being a Christian nationalist.
Indeed. So, yeah, we're talking about Christian nationalism today. We have alluded to it.
It was in your intro last week. I said adjacent to. Kind of like I'm not a weeb.
Yeah.
But I have sisters who are weebs, and so I'm weeb adjacent.
Yeah, I mean,
like if
I'm
you have
pretty
black
sure,
friends, you're black. No, I'm joking.
I'm pretty sure in one of our TheoBros episodes, I introduced myself as your friendly neighborhood Christian nationalist.
Oh, gosh.
That was more of a joke, but
Yeah.
now it's not a joke.
Now it's not a joke, apparently.
It's serious now. No.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, well, where do you want to go with today? Do you kind of want to, what do you want to go, David?
So first, I want to give some background information as to why we're talking about this. Just because TheoBros is, supposed to be where theology, where the Word of God meets culture and current events, which, means that we're going to broach the subject of politics, but I never wanted this to be like all about politics. But
Top 5 reasons Lyndon B. Johnson got it right. like not that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I never wanted this to be like all into politics. So normally, in any normal circumstance, I wouldn't have devoted a discussion like this to a political movement specifically. But I feel like the issue of Christian nationalism is becoming much more prevalent in today's culture and much more prevalent in the discourse. There's a lot of back and forth mud flinging over the issue. And so I just kind of wanted to present kind of like a balanced view of the issue. Me as somebody who's kind of been really interested in the development of the Christian nationalist movement over the last couple years, and then Jake giving kind of the outsider's perspective, because, I mean, you've obviously heard the term before, but I don't think you've ever really looked too deeply into it.
Not until today. I went ahead and clicked on some of the links that you went ahead and sent me, and then did my other research and kind of poked around the internet, found different sources, different definitions, different considerations of what it is and how it's viewed. And it's interesting to say the least. We'll get into it, but I think that it's important to remember that this is TheoBros Podcast. Yes, like you said, our intention is not to what was your words? Deep dive into political issues, that is. But I think that this is an interesting topic enough to where they intersect theology and ideologies and culture. Because I think, especially when you look at the grand scheme of things, this could be something that's very relevant in the future. And I think getting ahead of it right now would be kind of interesting to have a discussion about. And I'm not even sure if I, am a Christian nationalist myself. I wouldn't consider that at the moment, but I'm here to ask a lot of questions because I do have a lot of questions about the CN movement, I guess, especially the opposition it's facing, as well as the people who are kind of the prime voices of the movement. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. I'm a learner, and I remember you telling me all these things about these people, and you're saying names, and I'm like, what Brian Salvo and who are these people? And then as I did some research, I'm like, okay, I believe that, well, I guess we'll get into it. So I'm going to hand it back out to you, actually.
Okay.
I'm just an outsider.
All right. So I guess we'll start off with what is Christian nationalism? And Jake here has put the Britannica.com definition of it, which thought it was actually a pretty good definition. And then I'll go into kind of like my take on what I think it is and maybe what I think it should be. Because, there's a multitude of ways in which people approach this topic. But so let's just get into it. All right. So the Britannica definition: Christian nationalism, an ideology that seeks to create or maintain a legal fusion of Christian religion with a nation's character. Advocates of Christian nationalism consider their view of Christianity to be an integral part of their country's identity and want the government to promote or even enforce the religion's position within it. So that is kind of, a good basic overview. But there's also, as we'll see, a lot of nuance to it in how far different people want to go with various aspects of it. My personal take on the idea of Christian nationalism is that it's just rooted in the idea that America is fundamentally a Christian nation. The founders basically affirm this. Like, there's obviously some room for interpretation because
for sure, yeah.
Not all the founders were Christians. Some of them had some interesting things to say about the Bible and about Christianity. But I think if you look at their statements, the founders' statements on Christianity within the context of the day, taken together, I think you can make a real case that America was founded on Christian principles and was intended to be governed as such.
Well, I think also when you bring into when you bring in the writings of George Washington, and even in the later life of Benjamin Franklin, like there's a thing where Benjamin Franklin says, like, I would affirm that and believe that as I grow older, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he says something to the extent of, I have affirmed the fact that there is a effect of God in man and man's direction, and the older I get, the more I see it. That's a paraphrase, of course, but you can go look that up yourself. But also George Washington, I was reading his farewell address today, and it's very, very integral to he was definitely a Christian or a believer of some sort. And, things of that day, it's so common to go to church that day. I mean, that's one of the main social hubbubs of that day. It is church. I mean, it still is kind of in some forms throughout the centuries, but especially in that day, especially as we won our independence as a Christian nation, I would say, like all the songs that were written, all the letters that Washington wrote, like I think the Bible is probably one of the most quoted things during this time in the writings of such, even Alexander Hamilton. And I'm not an expert on that guy, but I think it's very interesting to see also, as the centuries have bore on, the removal of those men's beliefs and kind of fabrication as well of what they truly believed, and kind of taking certain imperfections of their lives and making that the whole point in the current education curriculum of America, disdaining their name. Like, oh, they were slavers, they had slaves or
Hmm.
whatever. But there's far more nuance to that. George Washington himself wrote, like, hey, we need to get, I really champion the abolitionists, you know? And that's the word I'm looking for. And I think it was the 9 out of the 13 states were in favor of getting rid of slavery by the time our independence came, like in 1780 something. So I think there's a huge case that people can make that we were never a Christian country, or that our founders were deists, in quotes. But I find that very disingenuous, in fact, if you actually read their readings.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some of them were deists,
For sure.
but I think overall they had some semblance of an idea that the Christian God was real, and that the biblical principles, whether or not they always had good takes on the Bible or not, I think at heart they viewed the moral principles of the Bible to be um
Self-evident.
like to be the preferable system by which a society is run.
Yeah.
Um
And we can get more into the weeds of that as we bore on this topic.
I don't want to get too
Too deep
bogged
right now.
down
Yeah.
into that, but yeah, so I would say that
What would you
if
say,
you
David?
if you look at overall the founding of this country, what was going on at the time, what the founders wrote about morality, about how a people should be governed, it's clear that nation was founded on Christian principles. One common objection that's raised is that the Constitution makes no mention of that, and which is, I think, unfortunate.
Hmm.
I would say that's kind of an oversight of the founders, but that doesn't mean that the country wasn't founded as such, because
Yeah.
you have to realize that in Europe, different denominations, different sects of Christianity, they literally killed each other, fought wars over differences in their religious beliefs. And like in France in particular, you had the wars between the Catholics and the Protestants. You have ongoing conflict in Ireland between Catholics and Protestants. In fact, it's only been until very recently, with certain modern problems arising, that there has been any sort of unity between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland. You had John Calvin burning non-Trinitarians at the stake. You know, it's
Damn.
like there was a lot of conflict within the wider church, because each sect sort of viewed itself as the holder of the ultimate truth, and they viewed the other sects as heretics that needed to be dealt with. So, flash forward to the settlement of America, you have a lot of, I mean, it's mostly people of Anglo heritage coming over here, and that's very, very evident in the culture of the country, and its founding stock is mostly Anglo, but not entirely Anglo. There were a lot of different groups from Europe coming over here at different times, and these people would have been in conflict with one another. So the Constitution's sort of religious agnosticism kind of makes sense in that time and place, because especially the whole idea of separation of church and state, which isn't in the Constitution, but Thomas Jefferson did come up with that phrase. And then, of course, you have the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So that's the only statement on religion at all that the Constitution really makes. Everything else has to do with the nitty-gritty of actual government stuff. And at the time, it makes sense because we needed a framework where all these different Christian groups could get along with each other and could be unified, see themselves as a unified nation in some sense. And that worked very well until the modern age, when Christianity's hold on the culture started to wane.
Yeah.
So I would say that the Constitution, being religion agnostic in its text, was kind of an oversight on the founders, but also at the same time, I think it's pretty obvious that that was strategic. That was not meant to produce the result that we see today.
Yeah, I would imagine they were extremely intentional about everything they put in there. And I think the absence of a lot of things was probably because it was heavily debated among all of them, whether they should include it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, like we said, yeah, we had a lot of Christian folks and everything. And as I say that, I could hear the people out in the ether yelled, David, and they were white and they were alone in land and had slaves. Look, okay, that's a different topic. These were people that had a lot on the line. Yes, they owned land. They could have had it all taken away by the Brits, man. Like, that's why we left, that's why we were fighting. So the people that were in power at the time that had influence, especially among the culture, we had Alexander Hamilton, we had Benjamin Franklin, who had the paper and stuff and all like that. Thinking back to Liberty Kids show, and these people were incredibly intentional with what they wrote, and it's not perfect. That's why it needed amendments, a Bill of Rights, all the other stuff as the time wore on. And it's still, as those amendments happened and acts and all these things happened later on, and laws, those were very imperfect as well. There's some amendments in there that probably need to be taken out. I would personally be a fan, this is just Jake's opinion, getting rid of the Reagan enacted, join the military at 18. Nah, I get the hell out of there, man. Like, keep it to 21. You can go and die for your country, but you can't drink. Come on, man. That's just me personally, but continuing on. It's not perfect is my point.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but I feel like as far as constitutions go, it's one of the best.
Yeah. I mean, it's gotten us 250 years here later.
Yeah, even despite the problems we've run into, the Constitution has saved our butt many a time.
Yeah.
Like, you think about freedom of speech, we take that for granted here in America because, it's just part of the legal framework of which this nation is run. It's like,
it's a Christian moralistic foundation.
The government cannot shut down your speech, no matter, and if they try, then there's legal recourse, that there's checks and balances.
Yeah.
If one branch tries, there's checks and balances to stop them from doing so. And we just kind of take that for granted, but they don't really have that in the rest of the world, even in the so-called free countries of the West.
Yeah.
Like, for example, take Canada. The Canadian Constitution has a section which affirms people's right to the freedom of speech, but then in that same section says that, if the situation is dire enough, is like if it's for the greater good, then the government can take it away. It's like, well, then you just kind of invalidated the first part now, didn't you? And that's
also, unalienable rights means it can't be taken away.
Yeah, and also, like the UK, the United Kingdom.
Ooh,
They don't.
here's the quote from the Canadian one. Sorry. Here it is. In quotes, it guarantees, in quotes, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including the freedom of the press. However, this right is not absolute and is subject to reasonable limits.
Yeah,
Damn, boy. That's crazy.
that's like fast track to tyranny right there. And look how it's worked out for them. You look at the United Kingdom, they don't even have a constitution. Their legal system is based on holding up of certain principles, like the Magna Carta, for example, as kind of the basis for the law of the land. But they don't have an actual document which outlines all those principles and says the government has to protect those principles. You know, the framework is there, but it's more guidelines than actual rules, to quote Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, and it's the same thing with a lot of other European countries. They affirm freedom of speech on paper, and then in practice, it doesn't really seem to work out that way. So, yeah, over here, where we have it, and the Constitution explicitly says that the government cannot pass a law abridging that right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I was actually, I believe, reading the kind of Gemini overview of that. The quote in here from Section 1 of the Canadian Constitution, demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So they can legally limit free speech with that phrase, demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. It says here the courts generally apply this balance by weighing whether a limit prevents harm to individuals or groups. So if it causes harm to somebody, they are the enactor of, or the god of, if they can prevent that harm, basically.
Yeah.
Regardless if it's right or wrong.
Exactly. And, you know, do you really want the government to be the arbiter of that?
Yeah, the arbiter, yeah.
And this is the whole thing, too, with the American Constitution and the whole legal framework by which this country operates. A lot of countries operate under the idea of the government decides that these rights are going to be the ones that it protects. So in essence, the government is the source of those rights. And if the government gives you your rights, then the government can just as easily take them away. The Constitution is written from the perspective of God-given rights or natural rights, as they're called now because people like to secularize things. But in that time and place, in that period, they would have been referred to as God-given rights. The Declaration of Independence specifically says that men have been endowed by their creator, that is God, with certain rights, that is the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So the whole of the Constitution is written from the perspective that people already have rights as a result of being created by God. And here are the rights which are very, very important to society. So we're going to make sure that we put it into law that the government is not allowed to trample on their rights. The Constitution doesn't give powers to the U.S. government. It limits the potential power of the U.S. government. We already have the rights. The U.S. government is limited by the Constitution from trampling on our rights. And that sort of concept right there kind of requires Christian morality. You just don't get that. You just don't get that idea from any other system. And yes, you can say that the origins of democracy were in pagan cultures like Greece and Rome. You could say that, and you can make that case, and that is true to a certain degree. Our founders were very, very, very into Greco-Roman philosophy, architecture, imagery.
They were nerds.
So, like, it's the whole reason why old government buildings are designed the way they are. It's the whole reason why the seals of the governments and the various state governments are all designed the way they are. So, yes, we do owe a debt of gratitude to the Greco-Roman idea of democracy in the founding of this nation. But at the same time, I just don't think you could get to the fully fleshed out idea of God-given rights that we're going to make sure that the government does not trample upon without a Christian moral background. So, yeah.
So Christian nationalism, from this definition, a legal fusion, it says here in the Britannica definition, a legal fusion of Christian religion with a nation's character. I would probably just equate that with how the Constitution is written, and maybe not just the Constitution, but everything surrounding it and the creators of it. And then it says here, advocates of Christian nationalism, this might be a little bit of a, what's it called? Not paraphrasing. What's it called? When you type in something and you're reinterpreting it. Anyway, it says here, advocates of Christian nationalism consider the view of Christianity to be an integral part of their country's identity and want the government to promote or even enforce the religion's position within it. So we're not asking for tyranny, let's just be very clear.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not asking for Christian tyranny, of course. But David, what are you asking for as you consider yourself a Christian nationalist?
I would say that I'm asking for Christian liberty, because Christianity, the Christian religion, the belief system that calls Jesus Christ the Son of God and the Savior of all mankind, I would say is focused first and foremost on liberty. The Bible says that it is for freedom's sake that Christ set us free. So when you look at the statements of Jesus in the Gospels, and when you just look at the Bible in general, like when God talks about how people should comport themselves, how nations should be run, liberty, freedom for the oppressed, justice for the downtrodden is always the kind of language that he is using. So when I say that I want Christian principles to govern this nation, I want that freedom, I want that justice, I want that liberty to be available for the people of this nation. So I would say that Christian principles, when applied rightly to the government, result in more liberty, not more tyranny. So that's kind of how I view the idea of Christian nationalism and what I would want out of a Christian government, or what I would want a Christian government or a Christian nationalist movement to achieve in America. And as we get deeper into it, I am not in total agreement with any one particular side of this issue. And I mostly want to broach the topic not to just deep dive into it for the sake of deep diving into it, but I want to talk about it for the purpose of, can we actually come to a common understanding in this nation that will bring about a result where the freedom, the liberty that Christ intended for people can be applied in principle to how the government deals with its citizens.
Hmm. Now, my follow-up question to that is, how do you do that when there are imperfect people running the government? Would it just be more checks and balances like the Constitution provides for the people that are in power? Or would it be like putting more limits on the people that are in power? Or would it be something to the extent of giving more liberty, giving more freedom, but at the same time, like, we're not going to limit religion, obviously, in a, like, freedom of religion, that is. Like, we're going to keep the Constitution the way that is. We're not rewriting it, that is. Or are we?
See, that's the thing. The Constitution already does a very good job of promoting the idea of liberty, because the Constitution fundamentally limits the power of government and then introduces checks and balances so that one branch of the government cannot become too dominant. And that is important because, as you said, we live in a fallen world. So it's very easy for even with someone with the best intentions to become corrupt and to become a tyrant. So the natural consequence of that, observation of human nature is that if we're going to have a government run on Christian principles, its power has to be limited so that human corruption can't take full control and impose tyranny on people's lives. At the same time, though, it requires the laws of the country, because you do have to have laws of some sense.
Mhm.
You can't just make it a free-for-all. So the laws of the nation do have to fall in line with what is considered permissible, what is considered not permissible, what is considered sinful, what is considered not sinful, as defined by the Bible. So the laws have to reflect that, or otherwise you get into this situation that we're kind of in nowadays, where all sorts of social sickness and perversion and violence and all sorts of terrible things are allowed to run roughshod over people's lives because there's nothing restraining them, because the laws in this nation have given up on enforcing Christian principles, and for now the laws in this nation very much enforce the principles of secular humanism, which the result of secular humanism is exactly what we've seen: the multiplication of depravity, of decadence, that leads to societal instability, which requires, I wouldn't say requires, but it inevitably causes total collapse, that is anarchy, or it causes a strong man to seize the reins of power to keep it under control, and then there goes our liberty. Either way, our liberty has been destroyed as a result of the multiplication of depravity and decadence in our society. So, on one point, the Constitution has done a very good job. Humans are corrupt, so their power in government needs to be limited in order to maximize human liberty, but also to maximize human liberty in a God-ordained way, in a way that is in line with Christian principles. You have to have laws that crack down on pernicious social sicknesses and depravities. So there's a balance that has to be struck between giving people freedom and not allowing depraved people to run roughshod over others in society.
So what does that look like in the sense of, like, let's just say, before we get to the next part, let's just say Christian nationalism is here, but it has principles. It has God as, like, for example, it's majority Christian, like the government is, and it holds up Christianity as a belief, but how does that transfer to structure? Like, are we going to be making more laws to coincide with the beliefs of Christianity? Are we going to get rid of people being gay, David? Like, what does that entail?
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing where someone's idea of Christian nationalism can vary quite differently from another, because there's no one way to answer these questions. But I would say for me personally...
Yeah, David speaking. What does David want Christian nationalism? Because I think the argument is we want to bring this country back to God. That is governed... it is governed thus so, right? By people who are majority Christian and uphold those values and uphold the God-given rights, that is. But what does that mean for people who aren't Christian, that is?
Yeah, I think it means that those people just need to be willing to be governed by a Christian system. And honestly, you know, aside from loudmouth people who have completely lost the plot, I don't think you'll find normal people who aren't Christians who object to living under Christian principles, because for the most part, people in this nation, whether they believed in God or not, whether they believed in Jesus or not, have been living under Christian principles. Like
freedom of speech.
Yeah, Christianity is deeply woven into the fabric of Western civilization, whether you like it or not, to the point where, like, you have, like, the new atheist movement, you know, like Christopher Hitchens, Dawkins, George Carlin, and others who were...
comedian?
He was definitely...
Oh, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
He was definitely a part of the new atheism movement.
Yeah, definitely.
He was less a joke teller and more of
He's more of a story...
He was more of a really crass philosopher anyway. Like, his comedy sets...
If you go watch his specials, it's like very much just critiquing the culture and what's right. What he thinks is right is wrong.
Yeah, he just basically...
With jokes sprinkled in between.
Gives his opinion... he just basically gives his opinions on stuff, but does it in a funny way. He doesn't actually tell jokes.
It's like that comedian around the same time, that bigger guy, who that clip goes viral every once in a while, where he's like, I figured out how to cure world hunger is the people who are living in the desert. You go and bring them where all the food is. And he like screams at the audience. He's like, hey, look at this. You see what this is? This is sand. Nothing grows in it. Don't live here.
Oh my God.
So I can't remember the comedian's name, but I'm sure you can find him on
That's
there.
funny. So yeah, you had those people who spearheaded the sort of new atheism movement, and boy, let me tell you, has that led to the absolute degradation of online discourse. Although I will say that there are people who were caught up in the new atheism movement or who were influenced by it, who I do respect.
Yeah.
But
there have been some good, respectable
like
atheists,
for example,
but I mean, they're not saved, but we respect them anyway.
Yeah. But
sounds like a lot of people I know.
But there was a lot of, but as soon as this movement exploded and it became much more acceptable to be an atheist, you had all these people loudly denouncing the church, loudly denouncing Christianity, loudly denouncing the Bible, and basically saying that, religion has to be abolished so that man can, or otherwise man will be held back from evolving into the next level. You know, that sort of rhetoric.
Yep.
And it's like the only reason they were even able to have that worldview is because of Christianity. Christianity allowed for systems of government for societies to be stable and free enough where there could be diversities of opinions on subjects like that. Without Christian moral principles, we would have Western society would have never become free enough for people to think that way.
Yeah, I think there's a thing to be said about, because when you bring up the term Christian nationalism, I'm sure a lot of people, alarm bells go off because of what they've read. Maybe they've read an article, maybe they watched a video from some content creator they follow, somebody who comments on the culture or is a comedian or whoever. And I think when you say people, basically, I think the main pitch is people want to just bring this country back to God when it gets to the heart of the issue. I think that's the heart of the issue, is people want this country to get back to the heart of God and to have God as the center, because it seems like, well, things were a lot better when that happened. And as us as a culture, the last 200 plus years, as we drifted further away from God, we've had repercussions of that on the culture, on lifestyle, heck, even in the economy. There's a lot of things that have been as a consequence of us moving away from God. For example, him being taken out of the schools, for example, and many other things. The rise of, may I say it, the rise of communism that has been slowly and very successfully embedded itself in every aspect of the educational system for the last 50, 60, 70 years now that we're coming up on. And that has been the greatest lie people have believed, is getting away from God has given you more freedom, that God is holding people back. That is the exact opposite. God gives you more freedom. He gave us the freedom to choose. And I think that's kind of where my mind goes, is if a government was to be run under, in quotes, Christian nationalism, I think I just kind of want it to go back to the way it kind of was sought after. But I think the way it has to be sought after is by changing the culture and the people within it, and not necessarily everybody who's the head of government, if there's real change to be made.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, any meaningful change in a country has to come from the ground up. It can't come from the top down. That's another reason why government power is limited in our country, is because we've already learned these lessons that a strong man can't make a nation good or moral. That has to come from the people themselves. So we've talked about how this country was founded, and so in order to understand the rise of Christian nationalism in the modern world, I think I want to go now into what happened after World War II.
All right.
Because I think that's very important to understand where we're at, what are the problems we're facing, and why the Christian nationalist movement has arisen to sort of combat this. So this nation was founded on Christian principles, and that was true for the majority of its history. People lived lives in accordance with Christian principles in this country, whether they professed belief in Jesus or not. Then what you have happening starting in the very late 1800s and really ramping up in the early 1900s is the rise of secularism. So you have the rise of people who were completely against the idea of God, who were completely against the idea of believing in a God, and who basically wanted to make man their God. And that ideology was called secular humanism. And unfortunately, what happened is the influence of secular humanism just very slowly crept in. Like I said, started in the late 1800s, really started ramping up in the early 1900s. And because the Constitution doesn't explicitly point to Christianity as the moral foundation of the country's laws, that provided a pretext for secular humanist principles to sort of worm their way into society and not have them be challenged and not have them be explicitly called out. And so this process continued and it sort of reached a fever pitch after World War II. So you'll hear people talk about the post-war consensus all the time. And basically what that is the idea that after World War II, the sort of transformation of society, of Western society, had happened. And basically the liberal order of the day, and this country was always founded on liberal principles, and those ideas, the ideas of classical liberalism, came from Christian thinkers. So it's, again, Christian principles created the idea of classical liberalism, but rot slowly crept in, and by the end of World War II, the ideology of liberalism that basically ran the country had changed what God it worshipped. Pre-World War II, liberalism worshipped the God of the Bible. The philosophy, liberalism as a philosophy, was submitted to Christian moral principles. It was inextricably bound to Christian moral principles. By the end of World War II, the liberal system which governed this country had disentangled itself from Christian principles and had hitched itself to the ideology of secular humanism. And people like to be like, it's not a belief, it's a lack of belief. No, humans are fundamentally religious creatures. If you take God out of the equation, we'll find something else to worship. And so secular humanism is just merely substituting the worship of God for the worship of man. And so what you had after World War II was what we call the post-war consensus, where liberalism had fully disentangled itself from Christianity, and now the God that they worship, the God that liberalism followed, was secular humanism. And on top of that, you had this brought with it certain ideas about peoples, about nations, that were contrary to the way people thought about those things before. People always thought of nations as being primarily made up of people. People groups defined what nations were. Nations were not just arbitrary borders on the map. They weren't just political systems. Nations were identified with the people of that nation, and the borders on the map and the political system that ruled the country came from the people that built up that nation, not the other way around. When secular humanism took over as the God of the liberal order, this fundamental assumption shifted. Nations became seen as mere abstract entities, mere lines on the map. People began, instead of distinct people groups, people began to be seen as merely blank slates that, with the right education, with the right molding, could be transformed from lowly, violent, terrible creatures as we'd seen for all of society, could be transformed from their violent, brutish state into higher, enlightened beings who valued peace, who valued liberty, who valued the dignity of all peoples. Quietly ignoring that concepts like peace and the dignity of every person and every people and the fundamental equality of all humans in terms of the value of their lives, again, came from Christian principles. But, but basically, yeah, people were now seen as clay to be molded by those in power, those who had the best of intentions, those who knew what's up, so to speak. And so this sort of mythos developed in the post-war period that the Allies were the enlightened liberals who triumphed over the brutish base nationalists that were the Axis powers. And anytime somebody got too nationalistic, anytime somebody said, wait a second, these ideas about humanity just seem fundamentally out of whack with who we really are and where we've come from, that the bludgeon of Nazi, of right wing, was quickly used to silence them. So, yeah, so this transformation happened. And so now we're living in the end result of that secular humanist liberal order, basically systematically tearing apart the moral principles that once held this nation together. And so it is in this climate that the Christian nationalist movement has arisen to try and combat that.
So it's combating something. What are the things that have resulted since the liberal order has now been tearing itself apart? What has sprouted up as issues that now Christian nationalists could potentially combat?
Well, one thing you have is mass migration. So that's pretty fundamental.
Whoa, it's getting controversial.
So that's pretty...
It's not already.
That gets to the fundamental nature of how the secular humanist liberal order views people. It's no longer about the people that make up the nation. It's just about, just get those bodies in here, get that GDP up, and it's like any ideas of like preserving the culture of a nation, of making sure that immigrants assimilate and are good for the people of the nation rather than supplanting the people of the nation or replacing the people of the nation. All that is thrown out the window because that's not important. All these people are merely bodies, human clay for the elite, for our betters to sculpt as they see fit. And so
when the mass migration happens and they flood the land, they're basically starting at net zero, right? Or do they have to build their way up? How is the GDP getting higher?
Well, I mean, essentially the system is designed, get these people in, get them working low-wage jobs, get them working low-wage jobs.
And since they're not legal citizens, you don't have to legally pay them the minimum limit.
Yeah, get the economy, boost the economy through their labor, and reap the benefits. That's basically the whole system, is get these people in, get them working for as cheaply as possible, and just get the economy moving by sheer brute force, whether that's actually good for the people of the nation or not. So yeah, basically, so we're coming to the point where the detrimental effects of mass migration can clearly be seen, and governments, for the most part, are unwilling um, to undo what they've done. And so now you see that's why you see movements, not just Christian nationalism, but Christian nationalism for sure, springing up to combat this. Another thing that has happened is Christian morality became seen as quaint, as old-fashioned, as shackling people, as keeping them from being who they truly are. And so depravity has overtaken this nation as a result of that slow moral decline. And it's getting to the point where people are starting to notice. Even people who are not living in accordance with Christian morality are seeing the results of Christian morality being torn apart.
And how so?
I'll give you an
Yeah,
example.
let's get an example here.
Like
The furries.
it's always like there's always been, or at least not always, but since for many years in this country, there's been the LGB movement, right? And it was all about gay rights, marriage equality, the freedom for people to, do whatever they wanted in the bedroom without
the government.
without the government or society in general judging them or trying to stop them or trying to say that, one ought not to do that kind of a thing. And this sort of thing naturally spirals out of control, and people who are even more depraved, even more decadent, even more further away from any semblance of Christian morality, they start to demand fairer treatment. They start to demand that people celebrate their lifestyles. And one such example of that is the T's attaching themselves to the LGB movement. And at first, it wasn't seen as a bad thing necessarily by those within the LGBT movement. But it's gotten to the point where many of the L's and the G's and the B's are starting to see the T's as very problematic. And maybe they don't realize it yet. But
some of them.
Yeah, some of them don't realize it yet. But what's happening is the fundamental change of removing Christian moral principles from this nation has gotten so far that even people who are living lives that would be called sinful and depraved by a Christian are now starting to look up and be like, wow, things are going to shit here.
The depravity just continues. It's not just L and G's and B's, it's then the T's and the Q's and then whatever else. That it's a social movement that has turned into victimization above all, and getting what you want when you want it through the victimization. From me as an observer, I'm only 29. As an observer in my life, it turned into gay marriage. It's like, oh, we just want the right to marry. Then it turned into, you better make a cake for us. Then it turned into, you better watch us make a parade and kiss each other. Then it turned into, you better watch us, transition from man to woman. And then it turned into, you better, like it in every form of life, movies, TV, music, social media, whatever. And then it's turned into,
Yeah, we're
It's
gonna
everywhere.
indoctrinate your kids.
Yeah, and
Make
your
sure,
kids need to know how
yeah,
important
and
it
make
is.
sure that they grow up. They grow up to celebrate and partake in this depravity. Yeah, and then another example you have of the decline of society after the post-war conversion to secular humanism that the culture went through is feminism.
Okay, here we go.
And now
Now let's just be clear here. Let me be clear.
I don't think I've ever been opposed to the idea of women voting. And I think
You say I don't think I've ever been though.
and I don't think, and that's the thing is, until very recently,
Yeah.
many people were not.
Uh-huh.
Many people who were considered to be extreme right wingers and dangerous far right chuds and all that were not, you know, opposed to the idea of women being able to vote. They weren't opposed to the idea of no fault divorce. Um, they weren't opposed to the idea of women being able to, you know, of there being no laws that would tie a woman to a man in any way. And, you know, it's like, that's all well and good. But then unfortunately, what happened is the feminists, you know, after they achieved total and complete victory in society, you know, they talk about the wage gap. It's like it's been illegal to pay women less than men for the same job since the 60s.
Yeah, I was sorry to interrupt you. I was helping a student one day. They were writing a paper and they had a stat about how women are paid less than men in quotes. But that was a study that was done not taking into account what professions men and women both do and how most professions that men do have, such as electricians, plumbers, CEOs, whatever, pick your poison, pick your career, a lot of it pays more.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that pays far more than the jobs women naturally seek out and do work. Yeah, you'll find a woman plumber, a woman electrician, and a woman CEO. Heck, you'll find a person who, you know, leads parts of this country that gets paid very well. But it doesn't take into account. It just says, oh, because of the average of all these examples, women are less paid, which is not, it was just very disingenuous. And I was telling this person, I said, hey, like, your writing's fine, but you have some really old sources in here that are just not true. And then I left it at that because I'm not a reading and writing person. So,
yeah. So,
in the sense of where I work, that wasn't my job to help them rewrite the paper. I passed them on to somebody who could do that. I was just making sure that they understood how to write it.
Yeah. So that I think right there is the real danger of feminism, is not giving women equal rights, but this idea that
now it's more people working.
Unequal outcomes based on the free choice of individuals adding up, you know, turning into aggregates, was unacceptable for these people. These people had to demand that there be absolute equal outcomes in every situation between men and women, or otherwise women were somehow shackled, chained, oppressed, you name it. And I think it's part of that liberal, that secular humanist ideology that sees people as just interchangeable blank slates, basic human clay for the people who are enlightened, for the people who have the power, have the reins of society to mold as they see fit.
Are you saying, David, that feminism helped make the line between men and women thinner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And now fast forward to today when feminism has basically
accepted men turning into women.
Yeah, has basically infiltrated every facet of society. And you can clearly see that the issue this is causing men, especially young men, are falling behind in this nation. They're becoming more disconnected. They're becoming lonely.
This is your next thing you're bringing up, right?
Yeah, they're becoming desperate. And again, this is the direct result of the feminist infiltration of society.
Oh.
And so Christian nationalism, once again, movements have risen up to say, hey, we need to change this.
It's also unfortunate as well that they've taken things that were not meant for them, in the sense of the LGBTQ movement has taken the Civil Rights Act and has reinterpreted it for themselves, which it was never supposed to be intended for them. So that's another aspect of decay as well.
Yeah.
Just a small side tangent.
And I guess I never really intended for this episode to be me just making the case for Christian nationalism. But at the same time, it's...
Well, what we're saying is true, to be quite clear. A lot of the things that we're saying are not opinions. They have already happened.
Yeah.
And that's why I brought up communism in the education system. Communism early on, this is why Reagan was so against it early on in SAG and all, et cetera, was because it made its way through the education system so much and for so many decades that it became a thing in different forms, such as feminism. It started in the education system, started in the higher education. It went ahead and then, suffragette was far before that, to be clear. But that was one aspect of that. And there were many countries, such as Russia, such as China, that implemented these thoughts and ideas and stuff like Leninism and all this kind of stuff in the colleges, in the curriculum, in the history books, and have done this for the last 50 to 60 years. We have the feminism waves, 1, 2, and 3. The second wave feminism was in the 90s, and then it brought to third wave feminism, which brought into the trans ideology kind of movement, where debauchery of this kind of viewpoint carried into 20 years after that into the 2010s. And third wave feminism became this big thing, and then so accepting of the trans ideology. And this is, you can go read about this. Look up Christina Hoff Sommers. Like, type in that name and type in and look up what she says about this kind of thing. She was an educator in the 90s. She is a feminist, or was, I think she still is. And she categorizes this. And it's not you can look up different stories and history books, articles, PDFs about this very thing. It's all out there. You just have to know where to find it.
So. Yeah, that's another consequence of social decline, is that the effects, the direction that feminism has gone in the modern era is so far removed from anything that could be considered good for women that even people who themselves are radical feminists are starting to notice it. And those people are now branded as TERFs. And TERFs somehow means the same thing as like Nazi or far right extremist, even though like people like J.K. Rowling could not be considered right wing in any sense whatsoever. But they're essentially treated the same way by the culture at large because they won't go along with the underlying principles that have allowed for this pernicious ideology to creep in. So now what we have here is...
Before we get there, small domino was women's voting rights. Small domino, big domino, Christian. Basically.
Man, are we gonna get canceled this episode?
I think we've done so many different topics about this kind of thing in different forms. We've been canceled many times, David. Bring it on. Bring them out.
Yeah, right, I can't imagine this is going to be a very popular in terms of people like, yeah, this is
Yeah, this is a great episode of TheoBros. Yeah, well, I was very, I'll be honest, I was very hesitant about talking about this stuff on a TheoBros episode, but we're getting to it. So let's keep going. And we kind of already established why. So
yeah.
go
So
forward, David. So we've had the issues. One is mass migration. One is the LGBT stuff.
mhm,
And then you have the feminism stuff and
yes,
kind of the downfall and downtroddenness of young men in this country.
yeah.
What's the next one? Or do we have another one?
So I think that pretty much covers it. I just wanted to get a picture of where we are right now and how that connects to the sort of
Are you saying you don't want women to drive?
overturning of Christ-focused liberalism and replacing it with secular-focused liberalism. So now we understand how we got here, and we understand why the people are starting to rise up against all these things. So let's get into the second half of the topic, which hopefully won't go too deep in the weeds, and that is the backlash that this movement is causing. Because what's happening is Christian nationalism is not one of those things that's just like, a household name quite yet. Like people know what it is, or at least they've heard of it, but they don't necessarily know what it's all about other than like, what like social media tells them, basically, if they've even heard anything about it. And so what's happening is a lot of people are starting to discover the Christian nationalist movement in the US, and as a result of trying to oppose the liberal secular order that has taken over this country, self-professed Christian nationalists are saying things that are very unthinkable to the person who was raised on liberal ideology their whole lives. And that was most of us, myself included. I mean, I still kind of think of myself as a liberal in a sense. I'm not exactly ready to just give up liberalism. I just don't want secular liberalism. I want Christ-honoring liberalism. A lot of people who are Christian nationals will tell you that Christian nationalists will tell you that liberalism has failed. We need to get rid of it. We need to completely overturn everything. And I don't think we need to abandon liberal principles. Just these liberal principles have to no longer be submitted to the God of secular humanism and must now be submitted to Christian principles, to the laws of God. So what I'm advocating for is basically that the God of the liberal order needs to switch back to God, so to speak. But, a lot of people are just sick and fed up of the way things are, and so they're using more extreme language.
Yep.
And it's clashing with the underlying assumptions that people have just grown up with it, and it's causing a stir. Even people among the church, even people among who would be considered, right wing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten so bad that even Christian nationalists, self-professed Christian nationalists, are looking at other self-professed Christian nationalists and going, "You're too extreme." But in a disingenuous way.
So there's infighting.
Yeah, so there's infighting. So we're kind of at a critical moment in where we're going to go as a nation. And
but I voted for that person and they got elected, and David, it's all going to be okay. They're going to take care of me. They're my God.
yeah,
Which, even saying that, it sounds a little bit like, I feel bad saying that, but there are people that do think that. Let's be clear.
yeah, and that it's unfortunate.
Whether it's Biden or Trump, you could pick your poison.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, even Christians have this idea. They didn't get that from the Bible. They got it from the secular liberal view, underlying assumptions that they were raised with.
Yep.
That they just never challenged. They have this idea that if we just vote for the right person, that person is going to turn this nation around. And I'm not discounting the importance of voting.
Yes.
But ultimately, you can't just say, "Oh, our guy," in quotes, won, so we don't have need of any of this nationalism nonsense. Everything's going to be fine. No, everything's not going to be fine. The rot goes all the way to the top. And while I'm not going to say that Trump is like evil by any stretch of the imagination, I voted for him, and I'm still glad I didn't vote for Kamala Harris. But at the same time, it's like Trump's just a man, and he's not a Christian either. Yeah. As much as he's coming around to being more to respecting Christian principles, more committed to getting this nation to be governed under Christian principles in some sense, even though he has made some statements to that effect and has made some actions to that effect. At the same time, he's not a Christian. And I don't think he's really, really interested in truly bringing about the sweeping change that would be necessary. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily mad that I voted for him, but it's just a realistic understanding that just because I voted for a guy and just because he's doing some good doesn't mean I think he's going to turn this nation around. He's going to save this nation.
Two things on that. Number one, I am so glad you brought up about how people's political beliefs and wants and desires become become idols in their lives so often. And this is why we get the crazy culture wars in general and the crazy wars online in politics. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was really wanting to talk a little bit about that, because, and just so that it's mentioned, just to be clear, because Christian nationalism in our own minds right now, the desire for us is to bring this nation back to God. It's not to uphold any political people as an idol or as our savior. So many people do that. Like, what's the video, David, the famous video of the guy that's in the car where the cops pulled him over and they're about to break in the window because he's being like, he broke the law, and he's live streaming himself in the car as the police are trying to get in the car, and he's literally closing his eyes and raising his hands, and he's like, "My Lord and Savior, Donald Trump, save me, Trump, save me," and then they break in the window.
Oh my God.
It's a morbid video, but it's hilarious. Lord. It's so funny. Like, "Save my Lord and Savior Trump, save me." It's like, oh my God almighty. And there's probably a lot of things connected to that video where the guy was just trying to get a click and that kind of stuff. But regardless, it's kind of the epitome of some of the things I see online. Now, I get it. Has God chosen this country, America? You probably could make an argument about that, but we should hold God above all of it, regardless, not our political leaders or not the fact of the country itself.
Yeah, we definitely don't want any political system or political figure or what have you to be an idol over God, which means that it requires constant vigilance.
Yes.
Just because our guy might have gotten in doesn't mean that the nation is saved now. It doesn't mean that we just simply trust the plan and wait for the government to come rescue us. It means we got to continue to be vigilant. We got to be continue to advocate for the truth. We got to continue to speak God's word, regardless of whether that's taken well by the political establishment or not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's...
I have a second thing when you're ready.
Yeah, go for it.
So the second thing would be, and this is not my political opinion or whatever, but this is just looking at it right now where we're at in America. We have election years. This is 2026. We have 2028 after that. Say, for example, in 2028, a J.D. Vance or whoever they pick wins. Okay, well, that might actually accelerate what Christian nationalism is, and it might bring it to a forefront. Who knows? It might get bigger and bigger as the time goes on. Or, not JD wins, somebody else wins, say on the Democratic ticket. Say they win. Well, I would make an argument that even after that, you're still going to get Christian nationalism as a thing potentially grow bigger. In fact, maybe accelerate even further if it was, say, if it was something other than a J.D. Vance got elected or a Republican ticket got elected. Like, I think in either scenario, this kind of wanting the idea of God to become the, for our nation to go back to God, the desire is still there, is what I'm saying. This forum of people drawing to themselves toward Christian nationalism, this term, to achieve that and to add things onto it, we'll get into it, but I feel like it's going to grow bigger regardless if it's a Republican or a Democrat. Or it could just die on the vine. Who knows? But I think as Christians, I think it's important for us to talk about this because I feel like it's going to get to the point where it's identified with Christians. And I feel like it could give a bad name to Christians or a good name. Who knows? But I think it's something important we should talk about regardless. And I was kind of like negatively thinking when you brought it up, like, oh, we should talk about this because this, and this. I'm like, why do I want to talk about a random spat on the internet between two random like pastors and people part of different churches in Utah? And then you said, well, you never know. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You never really know.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, basically coming to kind of the why of why go over all this is recently I've been noticing there's been a sort of new breed of Christian nationalists who have been coming up in the world, and they're making waves, and people aren't really liking it. Brian Salve, pastor of Refuge Church in Ogden, Utah. They're a Reformed church. Hosted, I believe last year, 2025, hosted a conference called The War for Normal. And it was basically a giant Christian nationalist conference. And it caused quite a stir because there were some vendors. I mean, it caused quite a stir for a lot of reasons, but one that I've seen kind of brought up over and over again was there was some kind of some vendors there peddling some spicy books, talking about a certain mustachioed man from Austria.
Oh no!
And yeah, so it's one of those things that just like rumors kind of spiraled out of control, and basically people like all over the internet were starting to get this impression that this guy had hosted a conference and where people were selling Nazi books, and he was defending the selling of Nazi books and all this and that. And the reason why, a lot of it was due to misunderstandings. The whole thing was way overblown. But I think the reason why it got overblown to that degree in the first place is part of the idea of Christian nationalism, if Christian nationalism is going to be effective as a movement, it has to actually overturn the secular liberal order. Um, and what is known as the post-war consensus, um, the sort of mythos of Adolf Hitler and the Holocaust and all that kind of thing and the Third Reich. It's almost like a founding mythos of the religion, of the modern religion of secular humanism, because like anti-nationalist sentiment is tied very deeply to the memories of and stories of the Holocaust, of Hitler's Nazi Party, of Benito Mussolini's fascist party, of the fanatics of the Empire of Japan.
If only they were able to look at Russia the same way during that time.
Yeah,
that
I know,
murdered
right?
Millions of Christians.
And that's why it's not really so much history as it's kind of mythology. It's a story that we're told to get us to react emotionally to certain things. So we're supposed to dislike nationalism because Nazis is basically what it boils down to. And yeah, that sounds like a gross oversimplification of it, and it kind of is, but also it's kind of the truth. We're told to feel bad about nationalism because Hitler, because Holocaust. And so, like, you don't have to necessarily say that, Hitler was right about everything. You don't necessarily have to say that actually I think Hitler was a good man. It's like, I'm not gonna go that far. And to be fair, I don't think there's some fringe elements within the Christian nationalist movement. There's always some fringe elements in the Christian nationalist movement, but
pretty much in every movement.
And the fringy elements are going to be more visible because of the fringy nature of the movement at this point. So that's something to consider. But I think a lot of people who identify as Christian nationalists, or at the very least want the same things that people who identify as Christian nationalists do, whether or not they actually themselves identify with that term, would not call Hitler a good man. Obviously he committed some pretty heinous evil acts. So we're not going to go that far. But in talking about the secular liberal order and its founding mythos that compels us to feel a certain way about nationalism, you got to talk about these things. And that ruffles feathers. That goes against the programming that we've received for decades now.
Are you talking about how we shouldn't be proud of our country or where we're from?
Exactly.
Oh.
Exactly. Because
like I shouldn't be a proud Belgian man if I'm from Belgium. Waffles and beer. I shouldn't be proud of that?
No, exactly.
Oh, man.
And that's the thing is, like, you should love your nation. You should be proud of your heritage.
Yeah.
And you should hold on to the history of your nation, both the good and the bad, because both the good and the bad is what shaped us as a people. And those are things which are fundamental to human nature. Humans lived like that for centuries before the 20th century. But what happened is there was a fundamental ideological shift in the post-World War II period, and now all of a sudden that thing is condemned, and we as people are programmed to feel bad about being white or being from America or being from a Western nation in general because Nazis.
Yeah, you can't be a proud Italian Can't be a proud Spaniard from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Even Frenchmen. And even if we don't like the French, they should be proud of their baguettes. No, I'm joking. We always just make fun of the French on here. But honestly, yeah, why not? I mean, we live in California. There's quite a diversification of different people here. There's a majority white, majority Mexican. I think there's a lot of Mexican folks that are proud of their heritage, and I'm fine with that. That's cool. Same thing, but why can't the white man, the Western man, I should say,
I mean,
be proud of where they're from?
Yeah, you say like the Western man, I should say, after you say white man, you try to correct yourself. And,
should I be correcting myself?
like,
Is that what we're saying?
I don't want to come off as someone who's like white pride, I don't want to come
power.
Yeah, I don't want to come off that way, but at the same time it's really
Careful, Dave. Careful, David, what you say.
Yeah, I don't want to come off that way, but at the same time it's really easy to get apologetic about talking about being white as a good thing,
I mean, like I said, like earlier about communism in the education system, and you could equate it to socialism in the education system. It's the leftist ideology in the education system that has found a boogeyman, that have found people to say that person's evil. Do not be like that person. And yes, Hitler was a horrible, evil person, but just because he was white doesn't mean that's why he was evil. He was evil because the frickin' dude was on crack and cocaine and was a tweaker and probably demon possessed and was a creep. Like, white, it was probably the last thing on the list that made him evil.
Yeah.
So, and look, yeah, he ate bratwurst. Doesn't mean he's evil for eating bratwurst. Well, no, wait. I don't know where I was going with that. But anyway, I was trying to make a joke about bratwurst, but I didn't succeed in that.
And that's kind of the thing where it's like, that's why the trick worked so well, is because while Hitler was, of course, involved.
Did you also know he drank water, David?
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
He breathed air.
Oh.
But yeah, that's part of the reason why the trick worked, is because despite Hitler's evil actions, despite all the twisted, weird, dark, occult stuff he was into, like, he started off his political career, and I don't know if he was always crazy or if he fell off the deep end sometime later, but he started off his political career saying things that were very, very much like
nationalistic pride, right?
Yeah, very, very much like just not anything bad. In some ways, his early political career he was kind of making Germany great again. As far as the things he said in his speeches,
correct, yeah.
Because there's a lot of videos you can look up online of his speeches that are like translated, and they like use an AI voice to simulate what he would have sounded like speaking English, which is kind of cool.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
I'm not like,
it's not like a Ken Burns documentary though.
Yeah, I'm not like super on board with all this like AI generated crap, but for those kinds of things,
some of those are cool.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So there's speeches where you can see there's videos where you can see where an AI has translated one of Hitler's speeches into English, but they've kept the character of his voice, and they've kept like the character of like the medium that it was recorded on, so it doesn't just sound like a text-to-speech bot reading a translation. It sounds like Hitler at that time speaking English, and hearing it in that way is like, wow, this really sounds like a lot of things that, without the context of, the evil things that he did, I would be like, yeah, vote for this guy. So like, I don't know if he was just hiding his power level, so to speak, or if he went off the deep end later. But I think early on, his early political career, he was saying a lot of stuff that just made sense. And
Well, I think also if you take like instead of the word German, but you put the word like Spaniard or Japanese, you could equate it to any country and be
yeah,
proud of your country is what we're kind of getting at here.
yeah. Well, also too, it's like even like
Also,
even the stuff about
yeah.
like being like he was not shy about being anti-Jew, though he definitely talked about how he didn't trust Jews, how he thought they were a pernicious influence in society and whatnot. And it's like we think, nowadays we hear that and it's like, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever. But it's like that's what kind of most people believed anyway. Not excusing it, but that's kind of what most people believed anyway.
Especially
So he
coming
was,
off of World War I, where those nations were decimated and destroyed. Those people were looking for a lot of hope, and Mein Kampf brought them hope. Regardless of what it led to, it brought them hope for that time, and that's why they were drawn to the guy. Doesn't mean make him an angel or a saint or good in any way, but he was able to kind of rally the nation again.
and this isn't. I'm not glazing
Yeah,
Hitler.
we're not glazing Hitler.
But the point of all this is that the trick works really well because when you start talking about national pride, when you start talking about being proud of your race, your heritage, your family, your history, all this, it can start to sound Hitler-esque because Hitler actually did say a lot of sensible things, at least early on
Yeah.
in his political career, that just really resonated with people.
Yeah.
And so that's where they really make use of, that's really where the post-war consensus comes in. That's where the use of Nazi Germany as kind of a founding mythos of the secular liberal order comes in, because if you start saying like normal sounding things that people for most of human history believed and lived according to without any problems, then what happens is you're that's very Hitler-esque of you. You better stop talking like that right now, or we're gonna label you as a right-wing extremist and sideline you from society. So what I'm getting at is people still have that kind of like liberal secular programming in them. Like it's even in me to a certain degree. I recognize that within myself.
You're telling me, David, that I could be proud of my race, my gender, my sexual identity. I could be proud of the cooking I do, where I'm from, the intersectionality of it all. But I can't say that I'm proud to be an American or a Spaniard or a German
Yeah, exactly.
or a Briton.
Yeah. Or if you're if you say you're proud of your race, like that's all great and well, as long as
It's not white.
as long as it's not white.
As long as it ain't white.
Yeah. So that's where we're getting into is
this also kind of
Christian. So Christian nationalism is not a new movement. It goes back pretty far, I think, the roots of it. And then you have a certain turning point in the writings of a Mr. R.J. Rushdoony, who invented the concept of theonomy, or I don't know if he invented it, but he at the very least solidified what it was in terms of like a discrete philosophical system. And then people started to build on that. And the Christian nationalist movement, though small and fringy, grew from there. And so what's happened as the movement's becoming more popular and younger people are getting on board, people are much less interested in beating around the bush about this stuff. And because they're tired of the degeneration of society. They're tired of what they see around them. They're tired of the decline, and they want change. So they're not interested in cleaning up their language to be approved by the liberal social order. They're not interested in beating around the bush. And this is causing a lot of friction. And then, of course, there's definitely people within this fringy movement who are saying things who are way out of line, and people sort of seize on that and paint the whole movement in that light. And it's nasty business. And the reason I want to shed light on this is because we're at a critical juncture in the history of our nation, and I don't want to see a movement that could possibly bring about change for this country, that this country is desperately needed. I don't want to see a movement tanked by infighting among people who should be in agreement over these things. Like, Christians should be in agreement that the United States should be run according to Christian principles. And yet, because of the nature of social media, because of these liberal assumptions that people live by without even really questioning them, there's infighting, there's flame wars, there's various accusations, unsubstantiated accusations being bandied about. And I guess the point of this is I want to present the idea of Christian nationalism, maybe not as you've heard of it, maybe not as you've seen on Twitter, maybe not as you've, the people crying about the racist right-wing extremists have painted it as. But I wanted to make a case for Christian nationalism, not in any particular sense, but as for just an idea, as the fundamental idea of getting back to the principles that this nation was founded on, and that is the moral principles of the Bible.
Yeah, in doing the research you've given me and stuff I looked up, it seems like a lot of the people in the Christian nationalist circles, with the exception of Doug Wilson, because I don't know anything about that man, but the other guys like the Brian Salvo and the David Webbons,
Joel Webbon.
I keep seeing David. I thought it was David. All right, Joel Webbon, sorry. But those two guys, they seem like people that are just trying to come up with a solution to fight back against the moral decay of this country. And this is their solution. And I think when you look at stuff like Brian Salvo's stuff, I think he seems like just a regular Christian who's just proud of his country and doesn't say any inflammatory things. But like you pointed out, David, if you go to his Facebook page, under very normal posts, you'll get a lot of people that just kind of hate this man, especially after the conference of Return to Normal, or what was it called?
It's the War for Normal.
The War for Normal. He's actually a musical artist as well.
Yes.
And I went and listened to just one song on his Spotify. The guy's got, I think, over 100,000 unique listeners now, which is crazy. But I listened to this song, Drawing Blood, and it's a beautiful song that you could very much tell is very, I mean, I won't say Holy Spirit led, but it could be. I don't know the guy very well. It's just only one song I listen to, but man, it really speaks to like the heart of the struggle of a Christian. And it was really beautiful. But anyway, besides the point, Joel Webbon, on the other hand, is more like, hey, this is what I believe. This is what we're due. I'm open to letting go of some things, accepting new things, but we need to get this country back on track. And then you have people like your Mr. White's, David White, who's critiquing people like Webbon.
Are you talking about Doug White?
Or Doug White.
Or no, James White.
James White.
Douglas Wilson, James White.
Yeah. But James White is this person who's kind of just mad at Webbon over the conflicting beliefs of Christian nationalism. And there's just a lot of infighting and a lot of like discombobulation in the movement, I would say.
Yeah, and it's like, ideally we should want the same things. And it's like, but there seems to be just a bunch of what I would call very unchrist-like behavior happening amongst Christians at this point. Because, you know, Satan is definitely quick to make use of such opportunities. And it's just, I want to try to present as balanced a view of this movement as I can. Clearly, you can tell that I'm kind of pro-Christian nationalism at this point. But at the same time, I'm not trying to, I'm not going to try to go too deeply into it. Like, I'm not going to start saying that Hitler did nothing wrong or anything like that.
Please no.
You know, I'm not going to say that, you know, I hate black people. I'm not going to start saying, like, I'm not going to start saying like things like that.
You're not going to become the next Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, David Reed and Nick Fuentes will not be in the same sentence.
Like, I'm going to stick to my principles.
Yeah.
Where I know that they're biblically based. And so, yeah, I'm definitely, I want to present as balanced a view of this as possible, because ultimately, whether you identify as a Christian or not, if you are a Christian, you should want something like this to happen. Maybe you don't agree with all the particulars, but I mean, we vote for the lesser of two evils all the time in politics. But then as soon as the idea of, you know, a viable idea for making society the way Christians believe it should be pops up, we start to nitpick and criticize and say we can't possibly partner with that movement because they support XYZ, you know? And it's just like, that's not how you do societal change.
I mean, just look at the movement of the last election. A lot of the people that were voting weren't even conservatives. They were independent, they were centrists, and a lot of them even were former liberals.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a populist movement, as been described from historical writings. But I think that's an apt description because it was a movement of change. And there's a lot of people that voted to make a change in the country that majorly won. And that was the way it went. And you can be unhappy with it or happy with it. But there was a desire and it got acted upon and surprisingly happened to my expectations.
Yeah. And also I wanted to talk about too, it's like, you know, a certain amount of political mudslinging, you expect that in the secular world.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with unregenerate people here. And I messed up when I was originally talking to you about this issue.
David.
Is I thought James Lindsay was a Christian.
He's not.
He's not.
He's not.
Which makes
you lied to me, David, and I believed you.
Which makes his antics so much more understandable.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, I don't want to like. I don't want to.
We don't want to trash people.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't. Despite the fact that he's not a Christian, I don't want to trash talk him.
Yeah.
Because he's clearly done some good in his career. Like, I don't know if you ever heard about the whole, because that was kind of his original claim to fame, was he submitted a bunch of bogus scientific papers to journals just to see if they would accept them.
Oh, yeah. That was a really fascinating experiment.
And he exposed the rot in the scientific community, the ideological rot that was taking place. that had just eroded any form of real, honest to God peer review or truth seeking. So he exposed that, and so I thank him for that. But him being an atheist, like, it really, no offense, but now it makes sense why he acts the way he does on social media. Um, but yeah, so more to my point is that's to be expected from non-believers to a certain degree. But when it starts being done by Christians to other Christians, that's when I start getting concerned. Because, like, me
Brother,
personally,
yeah, brother in
I
Christ, yeah.
I abhor leftism. Like, as I grow older, I just find myself becoming more and more right wing, and I just hate leftism more and more and more as an ideology. And yet, I know leftists who are professing Christians, and some of them I was really, really, really good friends with. And so I'm very careful when I talk to these people or think about these people that I am doing so in a loving way, because I know these people well enough.
You know where their heart lies.
I know these people well enough to think of them as a brother in Christ, and I'm very, very careful to um, not let correction or disagreement turn into hatred or disparagement against them, even though they've subscribed to an ideology which I abhor. I'm very careful when it comes to leftist Christians to treat them with the same love as I would any other right-wing Christian or a centrist Christian, because I believe in the connection between the members of Christ's body. The church transcends anything political.
Amen.
Like the church, the well-being of the church, the unity of the church is much more important to me than being right about politics. So I say this because I want to see the church come to some kind of unity on this, because yeah, it can be hard, because there's a lot of different there's a lot of ideological programming that we've received here in America just by virtue of being Americans and growing up in this system that really doesn't like it when some of these ideas get brought up. And I kind of wanted to kind of shed some light on the issue and to kind of dissect it a little bit, dissect the reasons for it, and hopefully present as balanced of a view as possible to hopefully combat the impulse to simply disparage others, to simply write them off as radicals or extremists, or they're not really Christian, you know?
Yeah, I totally get that. And I think the Bible is very clear, even though I don't remember the exact verse right now, but it's very clear about how we treat and how we are judged by how we treat our fellow brother in Christ. Even, I would say, even more harshly than those who aren't a brother in Christ. So yeah. That's all I really have to say about that part.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
we
I
our
think,
goal is to not cause division. It's to bring a level-headed approach to this Christian nationalism.
yeah, to hopefully expose the underlying issues, to bring understanding where before there might have just been name calling. Yeah, to be clear, a lot of these leading Christian nationalists, Joel Webbon, Brian Salve, Dale Partridge, Corey Mahler, I have various disagreements with all of them, and I have some more fundamental disagreements with some of them than I do with others. Like Corey Muller has said some just outrageous stuff. Just like, oh my God. But, at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to write off the movement because Corey Muller is a wacko. Like, I'm just going to keep pointing to the issues, and hopefully, if we can all kind of do that in a level-headed way, in a way that it's not disingenuous, I think we can get to an understanding where we can have some common principles that we're going to fight for to reverse this change, because we're in a dire place as far as the culture of this country is concerned. It's degenerated to a point where we barely resemble what we were even like 50 years ago or 60 years ago.
Yeah. I was thinking about going into some things I've written here, David, if you would be willing to humor me.
Okay.
And I want you to answer it from kind of the view of how you view Christian nationalism and how you desire it to be held. So right here, Mr. Joel Webbon has 4 pillars. And I don't know if we'll include the video of him below in the comments, but it's in my opinion, was very striking and kind of uncomfortable to watch. But I was all new to this Christian nationalism movement, and this is his opinion. And his is his consideration of the pillars of what it should be. I believe he's Catholic, but I don't hate myself.
No,
Catholic.
He's not Catholic.
Well, he said Catholic Church later in the podcast.
Well, he might have been talking about the Catholic Church, but
okay.
Joel Webbon is Reformed.
Okay, well then he is very much, to describe the audience who he is, he's very much like a Reformed Matt Walsh. Is how I would describe him.
Yeah. Matt Walsh is a Catholic.
Yeah,
he looks very much like Matt Walsh.
He does look like Matt Walsh. All right, well, let me get into it here. And then I also have some questions for you. So I'm going to start off with this. The 4 pillars that Joel Webbon lists here. And I want to know what you think of them and if you approve of them or not. And if sure, there's more nuance to you can add more nuance as much as you want. But here's the first one. The first pillar of Christian nationalism under Joel Webbon is majority Christian. Approve or disapprove, and what do you think of that?
Yeah, I would approve. When I watched that video, and he made the first point. I basically agree with him 100% on the issue. Is the government has to be pushing Christian principles, Christian morality above everything else, and it doesn't require that you don't have to be a Christian to be on board with the movement, but you do have to understand that this is a Christian nation, and that is in the benefit of everyone, not just the Christians, is that in the benefit of everyone that we return to those principles.
All right, next one is this. The next pillar that he has listed is male-led, masculine, patriarchal in nature.
Okay, so this definitely comes from his Reformed background. So for those of you who don't know, Reformed denominations are very clear in their teaching that God created men and women for different roles, and that leadership was a role that was God designed for the men to fill, and that the roles that he designed women for are to submit to their husbands, to be mothers, and to be homemakers. So that is very much in line with his Reform view. I don't think I agree with the Reformed view of Scripture in that regard, but I do agree that men and women are different, and that they were created by God for different purposes. So a lot of the patriarchal principles that Joel Webbon and others espouse, I agree with. I'm just not to the point of where I want to make hard lines between what a man is allowed to do versus what a woman is allowed to do. Um, and it's like, that's another thing that just ruffles people the wrong way, because feminism has been so influential in society that when they hear anything about women conforming to certain roles or being designed for certain roles, they just freak out, you know?
So you somewhat would disagree with this, but you understand the roles men and women have.
Yeah. I would disagree with
Like
I would
only men in leadership positions running the government.
I would disagree with drawing hard lines. But I also don't disagree with the principles behind them.
Okay. All right. Next one he has here is race realist or white majority, also known as white majority here.
Okay, so this one is tricky because this one really, really ruffles the feathers of those who have those secular liberal assumptions. To me, I still view myself as a liberal in many respects. And one of those things is color blindness. I was basically raised to not really see race. And that's not true for everybody. But me and a lot of people I know were raised that way. And, you know, I'd like that. In my mind, I want that. But as I'm starting to see the way things are going, it just doesn't seem realistic anymore.
How so?
It just seems like if you don't make if you don't acknowledge racial realism in some sense, you're just bound to repeat the mistakes of the past, like mass immigration. You know, like a lot of people don't have a problem with mass immigration because they're like, well, they're just people, right? People are people, you know? People are people.
We're all sinners.
You know, and it's just like, yeah, and they try to dress it up in religiosity, you know.
You're not a good Christian if you don't allow the poor and take care of them.
Exactly. So, and the truth of the matter is, God created different people groups different. And like the story of the Tower of Babel clearly shows that he ordained the separation of humanity into various nations, into various ethnic groups. That God did that. It wasn't man who did that. God did that to man. And the implication in the story is that it was done for man's good, not as a punishment for him. So yeah, you have to, in order to seriously confront the issues we're facing, you have to have some kind of racial realism. Because for one, you just keep letting mass immigration happen, you're not going to have a nation anymore, because here's the idea.
You'll have anarchy, basically.
Yeah, here's the idea is like before World War II, nations were seen as synonymous with the people within that nation. Post World War II, nations were seen as just arbitrary borders on the map. And people were seen as blank slates, who could be molded and shaped into whatever ideology was needed to further the plans of those in control. But yeah, So as much as I'd like to live in kind of like a colorblind society, and as much as I don't necessarily think that we really need to like deport every single non-white person kind of a thing, it's like at the same time, I am really tired of this idea that I can't enjoy being white because of some like collective guilt imputed to me by something that happened a long time ago, you know? And it's the same, it plays out the same thing every time, you know? White people get nationalistic in some sense, and people come down on them. It's like, no, you can't do that. You're like, you know, you bear the sins of the slave owners and the Nazis before you, and you need to be made you need to submit to you know, whatever agenda we bring, regardless of whether it's good for your people or not.
I always was so confused by seeing that kind of behavior in diversity trainings. I mean, we live in California. It's required legally to go through them at certain jobs. And I was always, first off, they're stupid in my opinion. But second, I think it always confused me why they brought that kind of aspect up. Like, you should feel bad, wigger, for who you are. It's like, why? Because if we're going by that logic of I should be guilty of the slave owner and the stuff that's happened on, you know, the last 200 plus years, why can't we extend that time? Why is there a limit on that time? I mean, there was genocides by different people in different nations all over the place. I mean, just look at Genghis Khan.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that mother effer just decimated Asia. I mean, and we all might connect him at some point. And none of that is ever brought up. The Leninism and Stalin's effect on Christianity and their murdering of Christians and Jews, of course, is very is never really reported at all or talked about. And it really bothers me because it's so exclusive. And the farmers in South Africa, yeah, they're white, so we're not going to report on them getting killed and getting their land taken away by people who are not white. Why aren't we talking about that? So it's very hypocritical when people say you should be guilty because of where you come from. It's like, well, you're no different, man. Like, why aren't you guilty of where you come from? Heck, black people captured black people in Africa. Should you, and if you descended from somebody over there and we track you over that you helped get people on the ship, maybe you should pay reparations to those people as well. Not because you're white, not because you're black, but because you trained over to that.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So anyway, that's all I have to say about that topic. But
Yeah.
race realists, I'm glad you said we don't want to deport every single person that's not white. However, like you said, you shouldn't feel bad about where you come from in general, regardless of where you come from. And we come from America. We're here. We shouldn't feel bad about it.
Yeah, and part of it too, part of the whole race realism aspect is it's like this country was settled by white Anglos primarily.
Yeah.
And people groups are different. Like, different ethnic groups are different. They have certain characteristics, certain mindsets, certain cultural things that they do and that they live by. And it's just like this nation was kind of founded as a white nation. That doesn't mean that non-white people can't live here,
Yeah.
or that non-white people have to be second-class citizens, but in understanding where we come from as a culture, where we come from as a country, you have to have an understanding that some of that is actually tied to our whiteness.
And I want to apply that to Japan. If you go to Japan, David Reed, go into Japan right now.
Mm-hmm.
You are a second-class citizen in Japan. You just are. You don't speak the language. You may not like all the sushi they offer, but you definitely will eat their ramen. You are a second class. PewDiePie is a second class citizen in Japan. Whether he likes it or not, whether he has status or not, it depends on where you come from. And Japan is getting more and more of this and are tired of more and more of the migration to there. Maybe not mass migration, but they're getting tired of all the weebs going over and them fat white guys going over and enjoying the culture that they still harbor closely.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want to do that, that's up to them. America, yeah, come over and eat our barbecue. That's fine. But yeah, like we got the recipe and you can eat as much as you want of it, you know? Like we're proud of the culture we have.
Yeah, America belongs to the American people. And part of that is tied into our race. So while
it's an aspect, but it's not the main thing, I would say.
Yeah. So part of that is tied into our race.
Push back on that.
Part of that is tied into our race, and that does not mean that I'm going to go around saying, white power all the time. But
white power.
But it does mean that I'm no longer going to be upset.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to feel bad for wanting good things for whites in this country, for wanting this country to remain majority white. I'm just not going to feel bad for thinking that.
Yeah.
Because that's just normal. That's how people feel about their own countries, about their own people groups the world over, and have for centuries. And it wasn't considered evil until right this very instant, like basically 5 minutes ago in the grand scale of things, and it was only applied to white Westerners. And it's just like, so the whole race realism thing it ruffles feathers, and I don't fully agree with Joel Webbon's take on things, but at the same time, I don't think Joel Webbon is actually the most extreme on it. Corey Mahler said way worse things about non-white people than Joel Webbon ever has. So it's like, if people are upset by Joel Webbon's race realism, like, he's not even the most extreme example of it.
Well, speaking of Joel Webbon's extremism, the last one I have is called The Jew Pill, David. Aware that Israel is not our ally, according to Joel Webbon, that is. What do you think?
Yeah, this one I'm a little conflicted on, because, for one, I don't like all the dispensational nonsense that runs around. No offense to any dispensationalists. I know quite a few. And I love you guys, even though we disagree, I still love you guys. And I'm trying
I don't know why I'm laughing.
So when I say dispensational nonsense, I'm trying not to mean that in a disparaging way, even though it does sound kind of disparaging, because I just don't subscribe to dispensationalism, for one thing. And I also don't subscribe to the kind of like hyper dispensationalist thing where, like, you got to pray for the peace of Israel and you got to make sure that you bless Israel. And it's like, I don't think that the modern day nation state of Israel is synonymous with Old Testament Israel. I don't think that Jews are elder brothers in the faith, as some have said. Want to know who said that? Matt Walsh said that.
What did he say?
That Jews are elder brothers in the faith. And I like Matt Walsh a lot.
I don't know about that.
I like Matt Walsh a lot, but when I heard that, I was like, what?
That rubs me the wrong way.
Where did that come from?
I don't hate Israel, but I just think it's just weird. Like Jews and Gentile are Jews and Gentile, and that's kind of just how I see it. I guess we inherited something, but I'm not going to go too deep in that because that's not the point of what we're saying here. But like, I just find it so weird.
Yeah,
aren't we all saved equally under the faith?
Yeah.
Yeah,
but it's not that
through Christ, that is.
Yeah, so
If Jews don't believe in Christ, you guys got to figure your shit out. I mean, not sure. So anyway,
oh man.
so
So
to wrap up the Jew pill.
To wrap up the J pill thing, I don't really. I think Joel Webbon and a lot of people on the right are kind of misinformed about Israel. I think they kind of subscribe to. I think they get a little too hyped up over conspiracy theories. Not that I want to disparage conspiracy theories because
we love them.
it's like they turn out to be true like 6 months later half the time, you know? So, but I think a lot of people on the right are getting a little conspiratorially minded when it comes to Israel. So I don't agree with a lot of what Joel Webbon says about Israel. But also, I don't agree with a lot of what the people who disparage Joel Webbon, what he says about Israel. I don't agree with what they say about Israel either. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, you know? So,
All right. I have some other questions for you. You down?
sure.
All right. Well, going along this kind of 4 pillars, I'm going to kind of expand it into furthermore here. Let me first write down the timestamp so it'll make it easier. That'd be 2. All right. So the first question I have for you, David, is this. Why do we need to focus? I think we kind of already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and just bear with me here. Why do we need to have such a focus on race? Why is CN, Christian Nationalism, so focused on race realists? And I have an example here. If the focus for CN is race realist, if someone from Belgium wants to come over, does that person have priority over a person coming over from Japan? Should we base this exclusively on race? Why not base it on which country is a designated close ally, for example, to the US? Should we make it harder for people from certain countries to come over, but not exclusively on race?
See,
because Belgian people are white.
yeah.
Are Japanese people white?
Yeah, see, that's the thing is I do consider myself a bit of a race realist. I'm not going to say I go as far as some of them, but I do consider myself a bit of a race realist. But also my ideal immigration policy isn't necessarily even based on race either. My ideal immigration policy at this point is deport as many of the illegal immigrants as you can, close the borders, and hopefully the native population, the white population, can start to have enough babies to get to replacement rate. Because this is another thing that is kind of the result of the secular liberal world order. This idea that we're overpopulating the planet and that human birth rates need to slow down so that we can, save the environment or whatever nonsense they're pushing. And that's crazy. That's insane to be deliberately pushing for the extinction of the human race. So, no, I want people to have more babies. I don't want us to need immigration to keep our population above a certain level. Because that's why mass immigration is such a big deal, is because if the native population of a country doesn't have enough babies to keep the population at a certain level, then economic output falls because there's not as many people being born to work the jobs that are created by the expanding market. So what's the solution in the liberal world order? Import a bunch of people so they can fill all the jobs and make the GDP go up. I want to get rid of that system entirely. I want Americans, especially white Americans, because, again, not that I hate non-white people, not that I want to deport every single non-white person in this country, Not that I want to treat them as second-class citizens, but I do want America to remain majority white because while it's not the most important thing, it is a
Factor.
factor in who we are as a nation, because nations are built up of the people that make that nation up. So, and I don't think that's a bad thing. When I say that, I can already hear people's brains exploding when I say that, but it's not an extreme thing to say. That's the way society functioned for so long, and it's only now that we've discarded those ideas that we're starting to see the rot and the decay that comes with discarding those ideas. So, yeah, I want to get rid of that whole system entirely. I want basically the borders to be locked down, and I want us to start pumping out babies to keep our population at the level that it needs to sustain the economy.
All right. I was going to go into birthright citizenship here, but we got to move on. The next one I have for you here, do we want to see a government that fights for Christian principles or not?
Yes, absolutely yes, 100% yes. And at this point, like, Donald Trump's not a Christian.
Nope.
Clearly, he's not a Christian. But when he does get it right, when he does do things that promote Christian values in this nation, I applaud it all the same. It just needs to happen. And Christians need to be doing it first and foremost, but I also welcome non-Christians who are willing to do it as well. It needs to happen.
I think a bigger point to be made is, yes, the government, for sure, I agree with you. But again, it starts small. It starts in the home. Well, first off, it starts in the mind. Then it starts in the home, then the community, and then the county, and so on and so forth. That's where it started. Me have been in the part of this community all our lives. We've grown up here in this part of California, and we are starting to see some really great change.
Mm-hmm.
And some really interesting change and some realization of some things. Part of it is definitely this new generation coming up that is starting to realize, hey, like, we are on fire for God and let's get it done. But it's also some of the older generation kind of holding things back from the new.
Mm.
And if you want to make a difference, I'm not saying go and kill your grandma. Do not do that. What I'm saying is go and enact as the Bible instructs.
Yeah. And when I say I believe the government needs to promote Christian principles, Christian morals, Christian moral values, that applies to all levels of government, not just the federal government. Local governments need to do that. State governments need to do that. And like you said, it rises from the bottom up. All positive change, all negative change too, for that matter, happens from the bottom up in a nation. So yes, it starts
and that's
with
your idea of have more babies.
Yeah, so it starts with ordinary Christians living as Christ commanded us to live, and that having babies is part of it. Like, one of the first things that God says to humans when he created them is be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. And then the Psalms talk about children as arrows in your quiver. And I've never met an archer who was upset about having too many arrows in their quiver. You need as many. If you're an archer and you're fighting for your life, because that's the context that the verse was written in, it's not talking about like sport archery. It's talking about fighting for your life as a warrior. Because David, the king who wrote the Israelite king who wrote most of the Psalms, was a warrior king. So when he's talking about arrows in your quiver, he's talking about getting ready for battle. So an archer in a war needs as many arrows as they possibly can. They need to be shooting that shit off like rapid fire, and they need to make sure that they don't run out of arrows. And the comparison between children and arrows in your quiver is made. That makes me think that God wants us to have a lot of them. So yeah, it starts off with local people living as Christ intended them to live. Um, and that affects local governments. Local governments promote Christian values as a result of it. When local communities across a state start promoting Christian values, that has an effect on the state government. The state government starts promoting Christian values as a result. And as more and more state governments start promoting Christian values, that bleeds into our federal representation. So it starts from the bottom up. And yes, at every level of government, from just regular people, because the U.S. government is a government for the people and by the people. So it's not the people and the government. It's the people have the power in this country. So at every level of government, from the people to the governmental systems that oversee those people, yes, the government needs to be involved in the promotion of Christian moral values in this nation.
Next question. Is the Civil Rights Act an anti-white legislation? It has been hijacked by, documented to be hijacked by the LGBT plus movement, which is away from its original intention. But was it a mistake? Is the abuse of the Civil Rights Act make it still qualified to stay enacted?
And this is one of those questions where it kind of gets into the weeds.
Yeah.
Because you have like a lot of stories that are spread around where it's like, that I don't know if it's true or not. So,
okay. Well, I think the major thing that I'm kind of pulling from this question is, in a Christian nationalist government or structure, would we take away and reverse different laws, whether that caused harm to people, like, or
like the Civil Rights Act?
Yeah, and maybe not dismantle or take away, but maybe reform it into something else.
Yeah, I don't know about outright just repealing it. I mean, well, yeah, I think actually outright repealing it, but replacing it with something that protects individual rights better.
Yeah.
Without being used as an anti-white cudgel, without being used to promote sexual depravity in society.
I think the Civil Rights Act, this is just my personal opinion, I think it was needed for a period of time. I don't know how long or short of that time it was needed, but I think it's probably served its purpose and needs to be reformed. And even you can take the race aspect out of it and just say, under the law, all races are equal under the law, or something to that extent, which I don't think it says. I could be totally wrong on that. But yeah, some kind of reform of it, I think, would probably just serve it best, especially since the abuse we've seen with it from the LGBT movement, or like certain court cases, like you said, like, I don't know whether to believe them or not, because I haven't seen like the ramification of it as well. But I hear people saying like tying gay rights to the Civil Rights Act, and now trans rights, they're trying to do that too. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. So this whole kind of thing is murky because
Yeah.
I'm definitely not an expert in this area. So, but I do know that the way the laws are worded currently, it has been used to basically punish white people in this country. And so I don't necessarily want to roll back civil protections for people who aren't white, but like the anti-white stuff has to stop in this country. Like I'm not even all that into race realism. To be honest, I still want to live as a colorblind liberal.
Person. Yeah.
I want that colorblind liberal fantasy, but I just don't think it's realistic.
With our current situation.
Yeah, I just don't think it's realistic. So I'm a little murky on the issue of it, but at the same time, I do believe that the anti-white stuff has to stop.
Okay. Next one I got for you is this. Okay, well, if they're not white, that's one thing. But what if they're not men? Should women vote, David?
Yeah,
Under your Christian Nationalist
yeah,
government.
yeah. I don't. A lot of people are in the Christian Nationalist movement are for repealing the 19th Amendment, and I don't think I am. I think I don't think it's feasible for one thing. I just don't think it would ever happen.
I don't think it would happen either.
Yeah. But for another thing is I don't even really think it needs to be repealed. I don't think it's a pressing need.
Yeah. I think it's good that it's available, obviously. And I feel like the women who are for repealing the 19th Amendment, they make an interesting case. But those women just have the option not to vote if they don't want to.
Well, I mean, they kind of have to, because unfortunately, there is a problem with women voting.
Careful, David.
I'm not saying the solution is to take the vote away from them, but there is a problem that needs to be corrected. Women overwhelmingly vote for leftist.
He's gonna say it. He said it.
Leftist, unbiblical positions. Women overwhelmingly vote for things like abortion rights and all that.
Yeah.
It's just like,
and this is not our opinion; these are facts.
Yeah, the studies have been done.
Studies, guys.
Yeah, studies have been done.
So this is not us condemning women for their choices. This is the choices that they've made.
Yeah,
it's the reality of the situation.
We wouldn't even had Democrat presidents if women weren't allowed to vote. And so there's a problem that needs to be corrected. And I don't think taking away the vote is the answer. I think that the answer again has to come from the bottom up. There has to be change in the culture somehow. Christian principles have to be Christian moral principles have to become infused in our culture once more, somehow, some way.
I also think there's an aspect speaking of conspiracy theories, I think there's an aspect looking at the 19th Amendment. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think there's an aspect to it where the Rockefellers and the big corporates of that day wanted this to happen because it helped women not stay at home. And thus, we had more people to work in the factories at the time. We had more people the economy to get bigger, kind of like what they're trying to do with the mass migration. With this, as a result of it, yes, we had the ability for women to vote and for other things as well, credit cards and such. But as a result, it also came with them being in the draft, for example. And also I don't know about the draft necessarily around that time, but they were able to go in the military. As well as the giant Rockefellers of the day and all these people that wanted this to happen got what they wanted. And thus women were out of the home, not raising children, and in the factories making whatever.
Yeah.
I think for that context, it's really kind of malicious in some of the forms that were kind of pushing that to happen.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
There's something to be said for the fact that I think that if you're a student of the word, if you are a committed Christian, you really have to come to grips with the fact that God created men and women for different purposes.
Yeah.
And that the purpose that women were created for is primarily being mothers and homemakers. And that's not a bad thing.
No. In fact, God has equipped them and men differently for those strengths.
Yeah. There's a beautiful dignity to being a mother and a homemaker that just gets glossed over in today's feminist culture. And so while I don't necessarily think that the 19th Amendment has to be repealed, that the vote has to be taken away from women,
I I think it's a very nuanced discussion. I think there's a lot of He-Man woman haters out there that will, or people who are accused of being He-Man woman haters who say this, when in reality, it's actually quite a few women I've talked to. I think, I'm not going to say her name, but I believe the wife of one of your brothers has told me that she's fine with it. She doesn't really care if it's repealed, which was a very interesting discussion me and her had at one point. Shout out to you. You know who you are.
Yeah.
But I really don't have an opinion in the sense of I would take it away. I don't think I would. I think, honestly, it also would never happen. And if it did, I'd be like, well, what are the positives and negatives of this, and why should I be concerned? But then again, it's like right now, it's not really an issue, I think, except for what you brought up in the sense of the women, that is, are known in studies and in facts overwhelmingly vote, for the left and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that has more to do with feminism.
I think that's to do with the
than
culture
it does
and,
with women being unfit for voting. But it is a problem that needs to be addressed. And
I think the full change of that is kind of with a lot of these things, it's going to have to happen culturally.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, with all this is, I have a belief that as time goes on, the church is just going to gain ground. We might have short-term losses. There might be ebbs and flows, but I think if you look at the grand scheme of history, the church is going to continue to grow and have more influence in the culture and in society. And so in one way, I think it's almost inevitable that if Christians continue to do what they're called to do, that we'll see the change that we need to see eventually, regardless of whether, certain laws are repealed or not.
Yeah.
So I'm less about repealing the 19th and more just about Christians getting out there and making a difference in the world so that we can combat this cultural decline that's led to the problems that are making people call for the repeal of the 19th Amendment in the first place.
Good answer. Last two, David. Stay strong. I know you're tired. This is a long one. All right. Should we outlaw gay marriage?
Ideally, yes. In an ideal world, yes.
And the reason being?
It just goes against God's laws. Like,
pretty simple.
Yeah. The Bible explicitly condemns homosexuality. I know a lot of gay people, and I don't have any problems with them.
I know a lot of gay people, and I have no problems with them.
So
I love the gays.
This is not meant as a disparagement of gay people. It's just meant as a reality.
A principle.
It's just meant as reality. The Bible explicitly condemns homosexuality, and explicitly defines marriage as between a man and a woman. So in a perfect world, yes, I think gay marriage would be outlawed. The better solution in my mind is that the government gets out of the business of marriage altogether.
He said it. That's what's up. I'm voting for you, David.
That's the better solution in my mind, is that the government just stops pretending like it has a say in what marriage is and gets out of the business of marriage altogether. Yeah.
Last one, David. Do you think we should pay attention to the Bible verse where it says, where it talks, I should say, about how God will bless those who bless Israel and curse those who curse them? I know you kind of already answered some of this with the Jew pill question, or with the true pillar. The Jew pillar. But does this verse, with what we've talked about, does this verse have any meaning nowadays? with the state of Israel, the country of Israel, the leadership of Israel, with how America helps Israel, supports them as an ally?
I would say we have to pay attention to every verse. It's in there for a reason. That being said, I don't think biblical Israel and the modern nation state of Israel are the same thing. I just don't think that. And I I'm not saying that God is done with the Jews, that he's just like, you're out of here.
That phrase, get out of here.
I don't think that God's done with the Jews, but also at the same time, I don't think there's like two separate, like, the Jewish people are going to be my people in one sense, and the church are going to be my people in a separate sense. I don't think there's a separation. I think the covenant with Israel is called the Old Covenant for a reason. The whole purpose, God's whole plan for all of history was always Jesus. Christ was always the plan. Christ reconciling the world to God was always the plan. So the church was always going to be the people of God in the end. In the end, the church was going to be Jews and Gentiles, those who are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, and those who have been made part of the family of God through Jesus Christ. That was always the plan. There's no the Jews are going to be my people in one way and the church are going to be my people in the other way with God, in my opinion. So the whole thing about, we got to bless Israel, the modern day nation state of Israel, and we got to, pray for the modern day nation state of Israel's prosperity just doesn't seem biblical to me, because I don't think they're the same thing. I don't think 1948 was God fulfilling prophecy. I'm sorry.
Oh, you mean the formation of the state of Israel?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's all I really got for you in terms of questions, David. I did have something written down here about George Washington's address, but it was more like just I copy and pasted the whole thing. And like, I think I brought it up because of isolationism, but I don't think that really has anything in this conversation here. I would love to talk about that, but I think that's for a more Snarfangle kind of stuff anyway.
Yeah.
This is TheoBros after all.
Yeah. But I think we've pretty much got to the end of.
Oh, we forgot to read the Christians Against Christian Nationalism.org manifesto over here. Oh, and this
was there any particular juicy bits on there?
What did they say? More like it's more of like Christians that are kind of more leaning left or straight up leftists, and they're kind of just saying like, hey, we don't like white pride, or we don't like Trump, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there's also this PDF that I have, David, that we didn't cover, called it's from the it's prepared by the Gassier, the Presbyterian Church in the USA. The Gassier stands for General Assembly Committee on
Ecumenicalism?
Yes. Ecumenical and irreligious relations, which is basically chocked full of things about why Christian nationalism is bad because it hates gay people, and how the founding fathers didn't intend the Constitution to be a religious,
You said PCUSA, is that the denomination? Presbyterian
Yes,
Church.
sir.
Yeah, they're
man.
known for being the woke denomination of Presbyterians.
Oh, they're the ACLU of Christendom.
Well, specifically Presbyterians, the PCUSA is known to be the woke denomination. So that is not surprising coming from them. Like they're the ones who like fully like affirm gay marriage and
those mother effers, come on,
and
man.
or
Mother
like
truckers.
ordain like lesbians as priests and all that.
Oh man, come on, man. People already have issues with women, and then you go ahead and do it with lesbians. That's like a double whammy.
Yeah, the amount of like Yeah, it's really funny how the mainline Protestant denominations, like historical Protestant denominations in America, have arrived at ordaining women through feminism, through being corrupted by feminism, and uh, we who have grown up in the Assembly of God, uh, a denomination who has arrived at ordaining women just because of interpreting the Bible as not prohibiting the ordination of women.
Oh, that's why. Okay. I
Yeah,
never really caught
it's very interesting how that works out.
Ooh.
How like
that should be our next episode of Theo Bros.
oh yeah,
Get
man.
Sarah on here and
Oh
let her
boy.
go. Let her go.
Speaking of dispensationalists,
We love you, Sarah. Shout out to oh my gosh. What's the YouTube channel? Resting in Him Ministries?
no.
Nope,
It's
that's not it.
seated in Him.
Seated in Him Ministries. Shout out to Sarah King. She's awesome. Yeah, I believe it's Seated in Him Ministries.
Yep, that's what it is. I
Sweet.
just checked. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Sarah. Yeah, we should get her on here. Talk about lesbians becoming ordained. What do you think, Sarah?
Oh my God.
I can't.
Well,
I would love to hear a rant.
That would be a fun discussion.
Or maybe like have her and Esteban back on, and Esteban asks like, why shouldn't why should women be pastors, or why shouldn't they? You know?
Yeah. Well, do you have any other questions, any other points you wanted to bring up?
I got nothing.
I think we're pretty much done here. Just I wanted to give a fair and balanced presentation of Christian nationalism because I think it's going to become a much more important topic of discussion as time goes on, and I just want to see the possibility of the church in this country coming together to fight for a common cause.
Mm. I feel like it's getting to the point where the churches are going to have to start doing that because there is so much division in all of it. Catholic, Protestant, evangelical, assemblies, what have you. Presbyterian. It's getting to the point where all these divisions and congregations and just all these things are kind of tiring at the end of the day. I mean, we're from
Yeah.
assemblies. We've been through, you and especially you and Thad have been through so much church stuff and church hurt and church separations and new churches and youth groups and old youth groups and new youth groups and leadership and old leadership and bad teachings and bad, you've been through the prosperities and you've been through the damnations.
Yeah, this does remind me of a point that I thought was really good that Joel Webbon made in the second half of that 4 Pillars video, was the podcast section.
Do you want to link that down in the description?
Yeah, I'll do that. He talked about Nick Fuentes and like
the Nazi.
it wasn't in that
I'm
context.
joking,
It was in the context of Catholicism, because Nick Fuentes, regardless, I mean, I think he said some things and he's done some things where it's like, I don't think Christians should do that, but at the same time, he's also received a lot of unjust hatred over the years. So I don't really want to get into the weeds with him, but
yeah, we don't.
I did.
That's for Snarfangle.
He was saying, but Joel Webbon was talking about Nick Fuentes's Catholicism, and he was saying that there's some serious theological differences between Joel Webbon and between what Joel Webbon's church believes and what the Catholic Church believes, such that Joel Webbon would be like, yeah, Nick Fuentes could not come to my church and be a member or serve in any leadership position or anything like that. We have to draw, we can't be afraid of drawing distinctions. We can't be afraid of protecting truth when we're convicted of it. But at the same time, he and Webbon can find common things in society, good things that are ordained by God to fight for, to try and bring about, despite their theological differences. And so I think that's a really great message for the wider church, that yes, we all have our theological distinctions that we draw, and I'm not saying that we cease to draw those distinctions, but there are common things that the churches in this country can come together to fight for. And I think it's high time that we do. And part of this is we kind of got to get rid of the ick that comes from discussing some of these issues. So that's why I wanted to talk about Christian nationalism more than anything else, is something like the church needs to rise up and make a difference in this nation. It's how we're called to live as Christians. We aren't called to simply be passive and isolated within our own little communities and not having effect on the people around us. We're supposed to be lights.
We're
Lights
supposed to be
to the
salt,
world.
Yeah.
Light and salt. Jesus said it in the Sermon on the Mount.
Light and salt.
You are the light of the world.
Salt of the earth.
Yeah, and the salt, you are the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And that's the real thing, is like the phrase light of the world is traditionally ascribed to Jesus, and he does have that title. He is the light of the world. But when Jesus uses the phrase the light of the world, he's actually talking to the church.
Yeah.
Not that the church produced the light by their own merits. It obviously comes from being in Christ.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that points to the church having a responsibility to shine light in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's...
Yeah, it's Christian means little Christ. We're supposed to reflect his light.
Yeah, there's another scripture, I believe it's in one of the Johns. I can't remember which one or what verse.
That's okay. What does it say?
But it says, as he is in this world, so you are, or something like that. Oh man, I'm butchering it so badly.
4:7.
Yeah, read it for me.
All right, I'm gonna go to King Jimmy for you, David.
Well, I mean, you can whatever version you like. I actually got off the King James train.
Oh, that's true.
If you didn't know, know
that.
No,
I know you did. All right, fine. I'll scroll a little bit down and the NASB.
All right, that's what I'm talking about.
The modern one here, it says this: by this, love is perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment, because as he is, we also are in this world.
Yep.
Amen to that.
Yeah, so before I ramble on any further about any other tangents, I think I'm going to end it here. So
I was waiting for you to do it. I'm like, is he going to do it? I don't know.
I'm going to end it here. So yes, thank you thank you, audience, for those who suffered.
Yes.
Who suffered through this episode with us to the very end. We thank you. For those who listened at all, we thank you. And Jake, thanks for joining me. It was a fun one.
You're very welcome.
Even though it was a long one. But
you're very welcome, David.
So when you walk through this world and you see the darkness closing in on you, When you see society crumble before your very eyes. When Timu Matt Walsh suddenly seems like a hope for a better nation, just remember to snarfangle on.
Bye-bye now.